Don't ever let anyone call you a traitor just because you refuse to be their free babysitter, especially when that someone is your own sister. Hi everyone, I'm Maya Chen. I'm 28 years old, work as a marketing manager here in San Francisco. And today I'm going to share the story about how my sister called me a traitor, just for refusing to be her unpaid nanny. If you've ever felt exploited by your own family, make sure to subscribe to this channel and stick around until the end. I promise there's a twist you won't see coming. Let me take you back to where this all started. Growing up in our household in Sacramento, there was always this unspoken rule that I was responsible for everything domestic, while my sister Sarah got to live her life freely. Sarah is 3 years older than me, but somehow I became the built-in babysitter, housekeeper, and general problem solver for the family. I remember when I was 12 and Sarah was 15, she would go out with her friends every Friday night to the movies or the mall. And I'd be stuck at home doing dishes, folding laundry, and making sure everything was perfect for when Mom and Dad got home from their date nights. They never asked Sarah to stay home. It was always just assumed that Maya would handle it. The pattern became so normal that I didn't even question it until my 16th birthday. I had been looking forward to this day for months because my best friend Jessica was throwing me a surprise party. I had new clothes picked out, I'd saved up money for a professional manicure, and for once I felt like I was going to be the centre of attention in a good way. But that morning, Mum rushed into my room at 7 a.m. with this frantic energy. Maya, honey, we need you to help with Sarah's wedding preparations today. The caterer is coming at 9, the florist at 11, and we need someone reliable to coordinate everything. I sat up in bed, still groggy, and said, "But Mum, it's my birthday. Jessica planned this whole thing for tonight." She paused for maybe 2 seconds, and I saw this flash of recognition cross her face, like she suddenly remembered. Then she did this thing she always did. She tilted her head and gave me this sad smile. "Oh, sweetie, I know, but Sarah only gets married once. We can celebrate your birthday next weekend. This is more important right now." More important. Those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. My 16th birthday was less important than coordinating vendors for a wedding that was still 3 months away. I wanted to argue, to scream, to demand that for once, just once, someone else could handle the family responsibilities. But I looked at my mum's face, saw how stressed she was, and I just nodded. I spent my entire 16th birthday writing down vendor information, directing delivery people, and making sure Sarah's wedding binder was perfectly organised. Sarah came home around 4 p.m. from her bachelorette spa day with her friends, glowing and relaxed, and the first thing she said to me was, "Did you remember to confirm the cake tasting for next week?" Not happy birthday, not thank you for handling everything, just another task to add to my list. That night I sat in my room while Sarah got ready to go out for dinner with her fiancé David. And I realised something that would change how I saw my family forever. I wasn't really their daughter and sister. I was their built-in assistant. I was there to make their lives easier, to handle the things they didn't want to deal with, to be available whenever they needed something. The worst part wasn't even that they used me. The worst part was that it had become so normal, so expected, that they genuinely didn't see anything wrong with it. When I tried to express frustration, I was being dramatic or selfish. When I wanted to make my own plans, I was being inconsiderate of the family. Fast forward 12 years, and absolutely nothing has changed. Sarah married David right after college, and they now have 2 kids, Emma, who's 6, and Jake, who's 4. They live in this beautiful 4-bedroom house in Walnut Creek, about an hour from my apartment in San Francisco. David works in tech and makes good money. Sarah stays home with the kids, and on paper their life looks perfect. But here's what their perfect life requires: me being available as their free, on-demand babysitting service. It started small when Emma was born. Sarah would call me maybe once a month. Maya, David and I haven't had a date night in forever. Could you watch Emma tomorrow night? Just for a few hours? And of course I said yes, because that's what good aunts do, right? Plus, Emma was adorable, and I genuinely enjoyed spending time with her, but once became twice a month, twice became every weekend. And when Jake was born 2 years later, it became this expectation that my weekends belonged to them. Not a request, an expectation. The calls would come every Thursday or Friday. Maya, what are you doing Saturday? We need you to watch the kids. Not would you be able to, or if you're free, but we need you to. Like it was my job. And if I ever tried to say I had plans, the guilt trip would start immediately. Maya, we barely ask you for anything. We just need a few hours. Can't you reschedule whatever you're doing? Or my personal favourite, I thought family was important to you. Family was important to me, but apparently I was the only one who thought I was part of that family. The breaking point came about 3 months ago when this guy from my yoga class, Alex, had finally worked up the courage to ask me out. We'd been talking for weeks and he suggested we go wine tasting in Napa on Saturday, this whole romantic day trip he'd planned out. I was excited. I actually liked this guy, and it had been almost a year since I'd been on a real date. Friday night, my phone rang. Sarah. Maya, perfect timing. David's company is having this couples retreat thing in Tahoe this weekend, and we really need to go for his career. Can you take Emma and Jake from tomorrow morning until Sunday night? I took a deep breath. Sarah, I actually have plans tomorrow. I'm going wine tasting with someone. Silence. Then, wine tasting? Maya, this is important. David's been working toward a promotion and all the senior partners will be there with their wives. I can't miss this. I understand that it's important, but I already made plans. Can't you ask Mom and Dad to help? They're visiting Aunt Linda in Portland. You know that. Maya, please, we really need you. What about David's parents? They're too old to handle both kids for a whole weekend. Come on, you know Emma and Jake love you. Can't you just reschedule your wine thing? My wine thing, like it was some frivolous hobby instead of a date I'd been looking forward to for weeks. I should have said no. I should have stood my ground. But Sarah had this way of making me feel guilty that was just so effective. I guess I could see if Alex wants to reschedule. You're the best, Maya. I knew I could count on you. We'll drop them off at 8 a.m., okay? After I hung up, I stared at my phone for 10 minutes before texting Alex. I made up some excuse about a family emergency, and to his credit, he was completely understanding. We rescheduled for the following weekend. Except the following weekend, Sarah needed me to babysit again because she and David had tickets to a concert they'd forgotten about, and the weekend after that, David's college friends were in town and they had to go out with them. I rescheduled with Alex 4 times before he stopped asking. That's when I realised that I wasn't living my own life. I was living around Sarah's life, constantly available for whatever she needed, while my own opportunities, romantic, social, professional, took a back seat to her convenience. The Hawaii trip was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be our first real family vacation in 5 years. A chance for all of us to spend quality time together and make good memories. Mum and Dad had booked this beautiful resort in Maui for a week. 7 days of sunshine, beaches, and hopefully some actual relaxation. I spent $3,000 on this trip. $3,000 I'd saved up from working overtime and skipping other vacations. I bought new clothes. I researched all the activities I wanted to do. I even learned some basic Hawaiian phrases because I'm that kind of person who likes to be prepared. But on day 1, as we're all standing in the lobby of the Grand Wailea Resort, Sarah turns to me with that familiar expectant look and says, "Maya, David and I already booked a couple's spa session for this afternoon. You'll watch Emma and Jake, right?" I felt my heart sink into my stomach. "Sarah, we just got here. I was hoping we could all spend some time together as a family." "We will, later." But this spa appointment was the only one available, and we really need some couple time. You understand. I looked around at my family. Mum and Dad were checking their phones, already distracted by whatever messages they'd accumulated during the flight. Emma and Jake were running around the lobby, hyped up on airplane snacks and excitement. David was standing slightly behind Sarah, and when I caught his eye, he looked uncomfortable. "How long is the spa session?" I asked. "Just 3 hours, 4 at most. You can take the kids to the pool. They'll love it." 4 hours. On the first day of our vacation. The vacation I'd spent $3,000 to enjoy. "Actually, Sarah, I was hoping to explore the resort myself this afternoon. Maybe we could take turns watching the kids so everyone gets some relaxation time." Sarah's face changed instantly. The friendly, expectant expression hardened into something I'd seen too many times growing up. "Maya, seriously? We're asking for one afternoon in 7 days. Can't you just help out?" But it wasn't going to be one afternoon. I knew Sarah and I knew this pattern. If I said yes to today, tomorrow, it would be another spa session or a romantic dinner or a couple's massage or shopping time or any of a dozen other things that required a babysitter. My entire vacation would become one long babysitting session with palm trees in the background. For the first time in probably my entire life, I said no. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but I want to enjoy my vacation too. I spent a lot of money to be here, and I'd like to actually experience Hawaii instead of watching kids by the pool." The silence that followed was deafening. Mum and Dad stopped looking at their phones. Even Emma and Jake seemed to sense the tension and stopped running around. David was staring at the floor. Sarah's voice, when she finally spoke, was ice cold. "Wow, okay, I see how it is." "Sarah, it's not— No, Maya, I get it. You're too important now to help your family. You'd rather be selfish than spend time with your niece and nephew who adore you." The word selfish hit me like a slap. How was wanting to enjoy my own vacation selfish? How was spending $3,000 and then expecting to actually participate in the trip I'd paid for selfish? But before I could respond, Sarah had turned to David. I guess we'll have to cancel our spa appointment, since my sister is too busy to help out. David finally looked up, and I saw something in his expression that surprised me. He looked frustrated, not with me, but with Sarah. Sarah, maybe we could... No, David, it's fine. Apparently, Maya has more important things to do than spend time with family. That night, lying in my hotel bed and listening to Sarah give me the silent treatment over dinner, I made a decision that would change everything. I got on my phone and booked myself a room at a different resort for the rest of the week. The Fairmont Key Lani was about 20 minutes away from where my family was staying, and it was beautiful. More expensive than I could really afford, but I didn't care anymore. I booked a suite with an ocean view and a private balcony, and for the first time in weeks, I felt excited about this vacation. The next morning at breakfast, I told my family about my decision. I've decided to stay at a different resort for the rest of the trip. I want to experience Hawaii on my own terms. The reaction was immediate and explosive. "You're what?" Sarah's voice was so loud that people at neighbouring tables turned to look. "I think it'll be better for everyone if I have my own space to enjoy the vacation I paid for." Sarah stood up so fast, her chair scraped against the tile floor. "This is unbelievable. You're really going to abandon your family on our vacation?" "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just choosing to stay somewhere else." "Maya," Mom interjected, trying to keep her voice calm, "don't you think you're being a little extreme? We're supposed to be spending time together." "We can still spend time together. We can have dinners, go to the beach, do activities. I just won't be available as a free babysitter." That's when Sarah said it, the words that I'll probably never forget. "You're a traitor, Maya, a selfish traitor who cares more about herself than her own family." The entire restaurant seemed to go quiet. I could feel dozens of eyes on us, tourists and hotel staff alike drawn to the drama unfolding at our table. Emma started crying because Mommy was yelling, and Jake was asking David why everyone was mad. I looked at my parents, hoping for some support, some acknowledgement that Sarah was out of line. But they just looked uncomfortable, like they wanted the whole scene to disappear. David was the only one who met my eyes, and what I saw there surprised me. He looked proud, supportive. I couldn't quite read his expression, but it definitely wasn't disappointment. "I'm going to pack my things and check out," I said quietly. "We can talk about this later when everyone's calmed down." As I walked away from the table, I heard Sarah say to David, "Can you believe her? Can you believe how selfish she's being?" And for the first time in years, I heard David respond in a way that wasn't just agreeing with his wife. "Sarah, maybe we should talk about this privately." I checked out of the Grand Wylia 2 hours later and drove my rental car to the Fairmont Key Lani. The resort was stunning. White buildings overlooking crystal blue water. Tropical gardens everywhere, and a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. My suite was on the 4th floor with a balcony that faced directly toward the ocean. I stood out there for maybe 30 minutes, just breathing in the salt air and listening to the waves, and I realized something important. I felt free. For the first time in my adult life, I had made a decision based purely on what I wanted, not on what my family expected from me. I had chosen my own happiness over their convenience, and the world hadn't ended. That first afternoon at my new resort, I did exactly what I wanted to do. I sat by the pool and read a book I'd been trying to finish for months. I ordered a ridiculously expensive Mai Tai and didn't feel guilty about it. I signed up for a snorkeling tour the next day and a hiking trip the day after that. I was finally on vacation. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be from Sarah or my parents. Probably more guilt-tripping about my selfish decision, but it was from David. Hey Maya, I just wanted to say that I think you made the right choice today. Sarah has been taking advantage of your kindness for way too long. I've tried to talk to her about it, but she doesn't listen to me. Maybe this will finally wake her up. I stared at that message for a long time. David had always been nice to me, but we'd never really had deep conversations. He was Sarah's husband, so I'd assumed he agreed with her perspective on everything, including my role as the family's unpaid help. I texted back, "Thank you for saying that." I was starting to think I was crazy. His response came immediately. "You're not crazy. You're finally standing up for yourself, and it's about time." Over the next 2 days, David and I exchanged several more texts. He told me things I'd never known, like how Sarah would plan these elaborate date nights and social events, and just assume I'd be available to babysit without ever checking with me first. He said he'd suggested multiple times that they hire actual babysitters or ask other family members for help. But Sarah always insisted that I was family and should be happy to help. The truth is, he texted me, Sarah has gotten so used to having you as backup that she's never had to learn how to manage her own life without you, and that's not fair to you. On my third day at the Fairmont, I was sitting by the pool when I met a couple about my age, Mark and Jennifer, who were celebrating their second wedding anniversary. We got to talking over drinks, and somehow the conversation turned to family dynamics. My sister called me a traitor for wanting to enjoy my own vacation instead of babysitting her kids, I told them, still feeling raw about the whole situation. Jennifer nearly choked on her drink. She called you what? For wanting to enjoy a vacation you paid for? She said I was selfish and that I was abandoning my family. Mark shook his head. That's not abandonment, Maya. That's setting boundaries. Healthy families don't expect one person to sacrifice everything for everyone else's convenience. Jennifer leaned forward. Honey, can I ask you something? How often do you babysit for your sister? I thought about it. Maybe every other weekend, sometimes more if they have special events. And how often does she babysit for you? I don't have kids. But how often does she do favours for you, help you move, come to your birthday parties, support your dating life? I went quiet because the honest answer was almost never. When I'd moved apartments 6 months ago, Sarah said she couldn't help because the kids had soccer practice. When I'd thrown myself a birthday party at a nice restaurant last year, she'd left early because Jake was tired. When I'd wanted to introduce Alex to the family, she'd said it would be too chaotic with the kids around. She doesn't, I said quietly. Then it's not a mutual family support system, Jennifer said gently. It's you giving and her taking, and there's nothing selfish about wanting that to change. That conversation stayed with me for the rest of the day. That evening, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I was going to go to the family dinner that was planned for our last night in Hawaii. I was going to face Sarah and my parents, and I was going to stand my ground, but I wasn't going to go in defensively. I was going to go in with confidence, armed with the truth about what had been happening in our family for years. I spent that evening preparing mentally for what might be the most important conversation of my life. I practiced what I was going to say, how I was going to respond to the inevitable guilt trips and accusations. I reminded myself of every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd put my own life on hold for Sarah's convenience. The next day, I bought gifts for Emma and Jake, beautiful shell necklaces from a local artisan shop. Whatever issues I had with Sarah, I genuinely loved her children, and I wanted them to know that. That afternoon, David texted me, "Sarah's been sulking for 3 days straight. Tonight's dinner is going to be interesting. Just so you know, I'm going to support you if things get heated." I was surprised by how much that meant to me, how for years I'd felt like I was fighting this battle alone, like I was the only one who could see how unbalanced our family dynamics had become. Having David acknowledge it and offer his support felt like validation I didn't even know I needed. As I got dressed for dinner that night, I chose my outfit carefully. I wanted to look confident and put together, not like someone who was defensive or ashamed of her choices. I wore a navy blue dress that made me feel professional and strong, and I did my makeup with extra care. Looking in the mirror, I realized something had changed in my face over the past few days. I looked lighter, like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. Tonight was going to change everything. I could feel it. And for the first time in my adult life, I was ready to fight for my place in this family. Not as the built-in helper, but as an equal member who deserved respect and consideration. The restaurant my parents had chosen for our final family dinner was beautiful. An oceanfront place with tiki torches and the sound of waves in the background. Under different circumstances, it would have been the perfect setting for a wonderful family memory. As I walked up to the hostess stand, I could see my family already seated at a large table on the terrace. Sarah was facing away from me, but I could tell from her posture that she was still angry. My parents were making small talk with David, who kept glancing toward the entrance. When he saw me, his face broke into a genuine smile, and he stood up to give me a hug. "Maya, you look great. How was your resort?" "It was wonderful," I said, meaning it completely. "Thank you for asking." Sarah turned around then, and the look she gave me could have frozen the ocean. Well, look who decided to rejoin the family. I took my seat at the table, choosing the chair between David and my dad, strategically positioning myself away from Sarah's immediate reach. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I was determined not to let it ruin what should have been a beautiful evening. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said, giving them both warm smiles. "The sunset is gorgeous tonight, isn't it?" Mom smiled back, clearly relieved that I seemed to be in a good mood. "It really is, honey. How was your stay at the other resort?" "It was exactly what I needed," I replied honestly. "I did some snorkeling, went on a beautiful hike, and actually got to relax for the first time in months." Sarah let out a sharp laugh. "Must be nice to abandon your family and do whatever you want." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. I could feel everyone at the table tense up, waiting to see how I would respond. The old Maya would have apologized, would have tried to smooth things over, would have made herself smaller to make Sarah feel better. But I wasn't the old Maya anymore. Sarah, I said calmly, looking directly at her, I didn't abandon anyone. I made a choice to enjoy the vacation I paid for instead of working as an unpaid babysitter. Working? Sarah's voice pitched higher. Taking care of your niece and nephew is work to you. When it's expected of me every weekend, without any consideration for my own life. Yes, it is work. David shifted in his seat beside me, and I could see him wrestling with something. Mum and Dad were looking increasingly uncomfortable, glancing between Sarah and me like they were watching a tennis match. Maya, Dad said in his diplomatic voice, maybe we could all just... No, Sarah interrupted, her voice getting louder. I want to hear this. I want to hear Maya explain to everyone how helping her family is such a burden. That's when David did something that shocked everyone at the table, including me. He set down his drink and looked directly at Sarah. Sarah, stop, just stop. The words were quiet, but they carried a weight that made the entire table go silent. Even the kids, who had been colouring on their kids' menus, looked up. David, Sarah said, her voice warning, don't. No, Sarah, someone needs to say this, and if you won't listen to me in private, then maybe you'll listen to me here. David's voice was steady, but I could hear years of frustration underneath it. Maya has been taking care of our children almost every weekend for the past 2 years. She's never once said no until this week. Sarah's face flushed red. She's their aunt. That's what aunts do. Is it? David asked. Because my sister lives in Chicago, and we've never once expected her to give up her weekends to watch our kids. We hire babysitters when we want date nights. We plan our social life around our responsibilities as parents. I watched Sarah's expression change from anger to something closer to panic. This was clearly not how she expected this conversation to go. David, you're being ridiculous. Maya doesn't mind, doesn't she? David turned to look at me. Maya, how many times have you cancelled your own plans to babysit for us? The question hung in the air, and suddenly everyone was looking at me. I thought about lying, about minimising it, to keep the peace. But Jennifer's words from the pool echoed in my mind. Healthy families don't expect one person to sacrifice everything for everyone else's convenience. Honestly, I've lost count, but just in the past few months I've cancelled 4 dates with the same guy, missed my friend Jessica's wedding shower, and skipped my company's holiday party. Mum's face showed genuine surprise. Maya, honey, why didn't you say anything? Because every time I tried to say I had plans, I was told that family should come first, or that I was being selfish, or that you really needed me, and couldn't I just reschedule whatever I was doing? David nodded, his expression grim. And that's exactly the problem. Sarah, you've gotten so used to having Maya as backup that you stopped seeing her as a person with her own life. That's not true, Sarah protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? David pulled out his phone and I watched Sarah's face go pale. I started keeping track a few months ago because I was getting concerned about how often we were asking Maya to babysit. David, don't you dare... But he was already scrolling through whatever he had on his phone. Let me read you some texts from just the past 2 months. March 15th. Maya has to watch the kids tonight. I already made dinner reservations. March 22nd. Tell Maya she needs to be here by 6. We can't be late for the theatre. April 3rd. Maya better not have plans this weekend. Sarah's mum is visiting and we need to take her out. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the waves crashing in the distance, the soft music from the restaurant sound system, even the conversation at the table next to us. But at our table, nobody said a word. Sarah's face had gone from red to white to red again. You kept track of my texts. I kept track because I was worried about the way you were talking about my sister-in-law, David said firmly. Maya, would you like to hear what Sarah said when you cancelled that first time to go wine tasting? I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it, but I nodded anyway. David looked at his phone again. I can't believe Maya chose some random guy over helping her family. She's becoming so selfish. Maybe we need to remind her what family loyalty means. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were surprising, but because hearing them out loud, in David's voice, made them real in a way they hadn't been before. Sarah, Mum said quietly, that's not appropriate. She was being selfish, Sarah insisted, but her voice was getting defensive now, less confident. Family should come first. Should it? David asked, because I've been wondering about that. Maya, when was the last time Sarah helped you with something important? I thought about it, really thought about it. She came to my college graduation. That was 6 years ago, Dad pointed out gently. When you moved apartments last year, who helped you? David continued. I hired movers. When you needed someone to drive you home after your wisdom teeth surgery, I took an Uber. When you wanted to celebrate getting your promotion at work, I went out with friends from work. Each question was like a spotlight, illuminating the one-sided nature of my relationship with Sarah. I had been so focused on being the good sister, the helpful aunt, the family team player, that I had never stopped to notice that the support only flowed in one direction. That's different, Sarah said, but she was starting to sound desperate. Maya doesn't have kids. She doesn't understand the pressure. You're right, I said quietly. I don't have kids, but I do have a life. I have a job that requires me to work late sometimes, friends who invite me to things, opportunities for dating and travel and personal growth. And for the past 2 years, I've put all of that aside whenever you needed me. Because that's what family does. No, Sarah, David said, and his voice was getting firmer now. That's what doormats do. Family supports each other. Family considers each other's needs. Family doesn't treat one person like their personal unpaid staff. Sarah turned on David then, her eyes flashing with anger. I can't believe you're siding with her against me, your own wife. I'm not siding with anyone. I'm pointing out a pattern that's been bothering me for months. Maya has been incredibly generous with her time and energy. And instead of appreciating that, you've come to expect it. And when she finally sets a boundary, you call her a traitor. The word traitor hung in the air between us. I could see other diners starting to notice our table, drawn by the rising voices and obvious tension. Maybe we should lower our voices, Dad suggested diplomatically. But Sarah was past caring about appearances. Fine, you want to know the truth? The truth is that Maya has always been jealous of me. She's jealous that I have a husband and kids and a beautiful life. And instead of building her own life, she'd rather tear down mine. The accusation was so far from reality that I actually laughed, a short, incredulous sound. Jealous? Sarah, I've spent the last 2 years helping you maintain that beautiful life. I've given up my own dating life, my own social life, my own opportunities to help you keep your life running smoothly. Nobody asked you to. You asked me to every single weekend. Because I thought you cared about Emma and Jake. I do care about them, I said, my voice rising now despite Dad's request to keep it down. I love them. But caring about my niece and nephew doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my entire life to make yours easier. That's when David dropped the biggest bombshell of the evening. Sarah, you want to talk about the truth? Let's talk about the truth. He was looking at his phone again, and Sarah's face went completely white. Let me tell everyone what you said last month when Maya couldn't babysit because she had food poisoning. David, stop. Maya is so dramatic. Food poisoning, please. She just doesn't want to help anymore. Maybe it's time we reminded her that we're the only family she has. The silence that followed was so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat. The cruelty of those words, the calculated manipulation behind them, hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mom actually gasped. Sarah, you didn't really say that. She was being dramatic, and she does lean on us. When? I interrupted, my voice sharp now. When have I ever leaned on you? When have I ever asked you for anything? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it again, because we both knew the answer. I had never asked her for anything because I had learned long ago that Sarah wasn't someone you could depend on for support. This is exactly what I was afraid of, David said, shaking his head. Sarah, you've gotten so used to taking Maya's help for granted that you actually convinced yourself she owed it to you. And when she finally stood up for herself, instead of reflecting on your own behaviour, you attacked her character. Sarah was starting to cry now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration and embarrassment, the tears of someone who had been caught in their own bad behaviour and didn't know how to get out of it. The truth is, David continued, his voice getting stronger, I've been wanting to say something about this for months. I've watched Maya cancel date after date, miss event after event, put her own life on hold again and again to help us. And instead of being grateful, you started treating it like it was her job. She never complained, because she's a good person who loves her family, David said, exasperated. But just because someone doesn't complain doesn't mean you should take advantage of them. I looked around the table at my family. Mum and Dad looked shocked and uncomfortable, like they were seeing their daughters clearly for the first time in years. Emma and Jake were looking between their parents with worried expressions, not understanding the adult drama but sensing the tension. And Sarah looked broken, not because she was sorry, but because her system had been exposed and she didn't know how to defend it. I think, I said quietly, this conversation is overdue. David nodded. Maya, I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up months ago. I could see what was happening and I should have put a stop to it instead of letting it continue. You tried to talk to Sarah about it, I said. She told me you did. Not hard enough. I was trying to keep the peace in my marriage, but that was at your expense and that wasn't fair. Sarah was crying harder now, and part of me felt bad for her. But a bigger part of me felt relieved, like a weight I'd been carrying for years was finally being lifted off my shoulders. I want everyone to understand something, I said, looking around the table. I love this family. I love Emma and Jake more than anything. But I can't continue to be the only person who sacrifices for everyone else's convenience. I need to have my own life, my own relationships, my own opportunities. And if that makes me selfish, then I guess I'm going to have to be okay with being selfish. Mum reached across the table and took my hand. Honey, wanting your own life doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. Dad nodded. I think we all need to take a step back and look at how our family dynamics have evolved. This isn't healthy for anyone. Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been desperation. Maya, I didn't realise, I thought you liked spending time with the kids. I do like spending time with them, but I don't like being taken for granted. I don't like being treated like unpaid help instead of a sister and aunt. But we can work this out, right? We're family. We can fix this. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and I saw something I'd never noticed before. She was scared. Not just of losing her convenient babysitting arrangement, but of losing the dynamic that had always put her at the centre of our family's attention and concern. We can work on it, I said carefully. But things are going to have to change. Real change, not just promises that go back to the old patterns in a few weeks. What kind of changes? Sarah asked, and I could hear the wariness in her voice. For starters, you need to ask me to babysit, not tell me. And you need to accept that sometimes the answer will be no, and that's not a personal attack on you or a sign that I don't love the kids. Sarah nodded, but I could see her struggling with the concept. And you need to stop treating my time like it's less valuable than yours. If you need a babysitter, sometimes you're going to have to hire one instead of automatically assuming I'm available. But babysitters are expensive. So is my time, I said firmly. So are the opportunities I've missed and the relationships I've damaged because I was always available to help you instead of living my own life. David squeezed my shoulder supportively. Sarah, think about it this way. If Maya was dating someone seriously, would you expect him to give up his weekends to babysit our kids? Of course not. Then why is it different just because she's single? Sarah opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. Because there was no good answer to that question, and we all knew it. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had completely changed. We ordered food and made small talk, but the elephant in the room had been acknowledged, and it couldn't be ignored anymore. Emma and Jake, bless them, were resilient in the way that kids are. They chatted about their week at the resort, showed me shells they'd collected, and seemed to adapt quickly to the new dynamic at the table. Aunt Maya, Emma said as we were finishing dessert, are you mad at Mommy? The question was so innocent and direct that it caught me off guard. I looked at Sarah, who was watching me carefully, probably wondering how I was going to handle this. I'm not mad at Mommy, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need to have important conversations about how to treat each other better. That's what we were doing tonight. Are you still going to come play with us? Of course I am. I love playing with you and Jake. But from now on, Mommy and Daddy are going to ask me ahead of time when they want me to babysit, instead of just assuming I can do it. Emma nodded solemnly, like this made perfect sense to her 6-year-old brain. Like how I have to ask before I can have a sleepover. Exactly like that. Sarah looked surprised, like she hadn't expected me to handle the situation so gracefully, but I meant what I said. I did love Emma and Jake, and I wanted to continue being part of their lives. I just wanted it to be on terms that respected my autonomy as an adult. As we were getting ready to leave the restaurant, David pulled me aside. Maya, I hope you know how much I respect what you did tonight. It took real courage to stand up for yourself like that. Thank you for backing me up. I honestly didn't expect that. I should have done it sooner. I've been watching Sarah take advantage of your kindness for too long. And I was being a coward by not saying anything. You said something tonight when it mattered. David nodded, then looked back at Sarah, who was helping the kids gather their colouring materials. I think this is going to be good for her too, eventually. She's gotten so used to having you as a safety net that she's never had to learn how to manage her own responsibilities. Do you think she'll actually change? David was quiet for a moment. I think she'll have to, because you've made it clear that the old way isn't working anymore, and I'm going to support you in maintaining those boundaries. That night, back in my beautiful suite at the Fairmont Kialani, I sat on my balcony overlooking the ocean and reflected on everything that had happened. The confrontation at dinner had been difficult and emotional, but it had also been necessary. For the first time in years, I felt like I had agency in my own family. I had spoken my truth, set my boundaries, and received support from an unexpected source. David's backing had been crucial because it meant I wasn't just the difficult sister anymore. I was someone whose perspective had validity and whose needs mattered. I thought about Sarah, probably lying in her hotel bed and processing everything that had been said. Part of me felt bad for her embarrassment, but a bigger part of me felt relief that the truth was finally out in the open. 3 months later, I was sitting in my San Francisco apartment on a Saturday afternoon, getting ready for a date with Mark, the guy I'd met in Hawaii. We'd been talking ever since that trip, and he was flying in from Los Angeles for the weekend to see me. My phone rang, and I saw Sarah's name on the screen. My first instinct was anxiety. Was she calling to demand babysitting? But then I remembered that I'd set boundaries, and I answered with confidence. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Maya. I was wondering, David and I would love to go out to dinner next Saturday night. Would you be available to watch Emma and Jake? I totally understand if you have plans, but I thought I'd ask. I smiled. She was asking, not telling. She was acknowledging that I might have plans. It was a small change, but it was a real one. Actually, I do have plans next Saturday. Mark is visiting again, and we're going to a concert. But I'm free the Saturday after that, if you want to try then. Oh, that's great. I mean about Mark visiting. How are things going with him? This was new too, Sarah asking about my dating life instead of just seeing it as an inconvenience to her schedule. Really well. We're taking things slow since we live in different cities, but I really like him. I'm happy for you, Maya. You deserve someone wonderful. After we hung up, I realized something important had shifted. Sarah was making an effort to change, and our relationship was slowly becoming more balanced. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when she slipped back into old patterns, but the foundation had changed. David had kept his word about supporting my boundaries. When Sarah occasionally tried to guilt me into babysitting, he would remind her of our conversation in Hawaii and suggest they hire a professional sitter instead. My relationship with my parents had improved too. They'd started making an effort to include me in family activities that didn't revolve around childcare. And they seemed to finally see me as an adult with my own life rather than just Sarah's built-in helper. But the biggest change was in myself. I had learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary. I had learned that my time and energy were valuable, and that it was okay to prioritize my own happiness and growth. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Mark was here and I was excited to see him. We had plans to explore the city together, maybe visit the farmers' market in the Mission and take a walk along the waterfront. As I grabbed my purse and headed to the door, I reflected on how different my life looked now compared to 3 months ago. I was dating someone I genuinely cared about. I was pursuing hobbies and friendships that fulfilled me. And I was no longer afraid to say no when people made unreasonable demands on my time. I thought about that family dinner in Hawaii and David's question that had changed everything. When was the last time Sarah helped you with something important? The answer was still pretty much never. But the difference was that I no longer needed her to. I had built a life that was full and satisfying on its own terms, and my relationship with my family was now just one part of that life, not the centre around which everything else revolved. As I opened the door to greet Mark, I realised something profound. I wasn't the family's built-in helper anymore. I wasn't the person who sacrificed her own happiness for everyone else's convenience. I was Maya Chen, a woman with her own dreams, her own relationships, and her own boundaries. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt like enough. The question I want to leave you with today is this. Have you ever been called selfish by your family just for setting healthy boundaries? Have you ever felt like you're expected to sacrifice your own happiness for everyone else's convenience? If this story resonated with you, please share your own experience in the comments below. Sometimes we need to hear that we're not alone in these struggles, and that choosing ourselves doesn't make us bad people, it makes us human. Remember to like this video if it helped you feel less alone, and subscribe to this channel for more stories about standing up for yourself in difficult family dynamics. I'll see you in the next one.